My world shattered when my wife brought her secret boyfriend home to replace me in our family. But our 7-year-old son's brave words changed everything in ways no one expected. Watch until the end. Subscribe to the channel and write where you're watching from in the comments. I never thought my life would become the plot of some twisted drama. Yet here I was, watching my wife of 8 years introducing a strange man and his 2 children to our son in our own living room. The same living room where we had built countless memories together, where we had laughed, fought, and loved. Now it had become the stage for the final act of our marriage. "Jamie, honey, this is Robert and his kids, Lily and Max," my wife Sarah said with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "They're going to be spending a lot more time with us from now on." Our son, Jamie, looked confused as he glanced between me, Sarah, and these strangers who had suddenly appeared in our home. He was only 7 years old, too young to comprehend the adult complexities unfolding before him. But children have an uncanny ability to sense when something is wrong, and Jamie's small face scrunched up in uncertainty. I stood frozen in the doorway, my briefcase still in hand, having just returned from work to find this ambush waiting for me. Sarah hadn't even warned me. No discussion, no preparation, nothing. Just 3 strangers sitting on our couch as if they belonged there. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady for Jamie's sake. Sarah straightened her back, her blonde hair perfectly styled as always. She was dressed more formally than she usually would be for a Saturday at home. I should have noticed the signs earlier. "Michael, we need to talk," she said, her voice taking on that rehearsed quality I'd come to recognize whenever she had prepared something in advance. "Robert and I have been seeing each other for a while now, and we think it's time for the children to get to know each other, since we'll all be family soon." The words hit me like physical blows, each one a punch to the gut that left me breathless. Sarah and I had been having problems, sure. What couple doesn't? But this was beyond anything I had imagined. "Family," I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. Robert, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and an expensive watch that caught the light as he moved, stood up and extended his hand toward me. "I've heard a lot about you, Michael," he said with a confidence that suggested he believed he had already won. "I hope we can make this transition as smooth as possible for everyone involved." I ignored his outstretched hand. My attention was on Jamie, who was now looking increasingly distressed. "Jamie, can you go to your room for a bit while the adults talk?" I said gently. But before Jamie could move, Sarah interjected, "No, he needs to stay. He needs to understand what's happening. We're going to be honest with him." Her words carried a finality that sent chills down my spine. This wasn't a discussion, this was an execution, and I was the condemned. "Daddy, why are these people in our house?" Jamie asked, his small voice cutting through the tension. Sarah knelt down to Jamie's level, her expression softening in that way it always did when she spoke to our son. "Honey, sometimes grown-ups decide they don't want to be married anymore. Mommy and Daddy won't be living together soon, but you'll have 2 homes instead of 1. And Robert and his kids will be part of your new family." Jamie's eyes widened, filling with tears as the reality of what his mother was saying began to sink in. "But I don't want a new family," he said, his voice cracking. "I want my family." "I know this is hard to understand right now," Sarah continued, "but sometimes people grow apart. Mommy is happier with Robert now." I felt a surge of anger rising within me. "Sarah, stop. This isn't the way to do this. We haven't even discussed separation or divorce, and you're already bringing your boyfriend and his children into our home." Robert's kids, a girl who looked about 10 and a boy around 12, sat uncomfortably on the couch. The girl was looking down at her hands while the boy stared at his phone, clearly wishing he was anywhere but here. "There's nothing to discuss, Michael," Sarah said, standing up again. "I've made my decision. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I thought it would be easier this way to just get everything out in the open." "Easier for whom?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "Certainly not for Jamie or for me." "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be," Sarah replied, a hint of irritation creeping into her tone. "Robert has a beautiful home with plenty of space for all of us. Jamie will have his own room, a bigger yard to play in, and new siblings." Jamie, who had been quietly crying, suddenly looked up with an expression that broke my heart. His next words, however, stunned everyone in the room. "If Daddy goes, I go too," he said with a determination I'd never heard from him before. "I won't stay with you and him." The room fell silent. Sarah's face went pale, her composure cracking for the first time since I'd walked in. She clearly hadn't expected this reaction from our son, who had always been a mama's boy. "Jamie, honey, you don't understand," she said, reaching for him, but Jamie backed away, moving closer to me. I understand, he said, his small voice surprisingly steady despite his tears. You want to throw Daddy away like my old toys, but Daddy's not a toy, he's my daddy and I love him. Sarah looked as if she'd been slapped. Robert shifted uncomfortably while his children exchanged awkward glances. The perfectly orchestrated scene she had planned was unraveling before her eyes. No one is throwing anyone away, Sarah tried to explain, but Jamie wasn't having it. You're a liar, he said, the words cutting through the room like a knife. You told me yesterday that we were going to surprise Daddy with a special guest. This isn't a good surprise. This is a bad surprise. I placed my hand gently on Jamie's shoulder, both to comfort him and to remind him to be respectful despite the circumstances. But inside, I was reeling from this revelation. Sarah had planned this introduction as a surprise. She had deliberately set up this scenario to blindside me in front of our son and strangers. I think it's best if you all leave now, I said quietly but firmly to Robert. This is still my home, and this conversation needs to happen between Sarah and me first, without an audience. Robert hesitated, looking at Sarah, who seemed torn between anger and embarrassment. I'd prefer if Robert stayed, she said, recovering some of her composure. Whatever you have to say to me, you can say in front of him. No, Sarah, I replied, my patience wearing thin. This isn't how adults handle these situations. We talk privately first, we make arrangements, we prepare our child. We don't ambush each other with new relationships before we've even discussed ending our marriage. Jamie was still clinging to my side, and I could feel him trembling. The poor kid was caught in the middle of an adult mess he should never have been exposed to. Fine, Sarah finally conceded, perhaps realizing how badly her plan had backfired. Robert, maybe you should take Lily and Max home. I'll call you later. Robert nodded, looking somewhat relieved to escape the awkward situation. He ushered his children toward the door, pausing briefly to squeeze Sarah's hand reassuringly. Come on, Jamie, I said once they were gone. Why don't you go play in your room for a bit while Mommy and I talk? Promise you won't leave? He asked, his eyes wide with fear. I promise I won't leave without saying goodbye, I assured him, choosing my words carefully. I couldn't promise I wouldn't leave at all, given the circumstances, but I could promise not to disappear on him. Once Jamie was upstairs, I turned to Sarah, who was now sitting on the couch, her earlier confidence replaced with defensive anger. What the hell was that, Sarah? I asked, keeping my voice low so Jamie wouldn't hear. Bringing your affair partner into our home to meet our son before you've even told me you want a divorce. What were you thinking? It wasn't an affair, she said immediately. Not really. Robert and I only got together after things between us were already over. Over, I repeated incredulously. When exactly did our marriage end, Sarah? Because I must have missed that conversation, she sighed, running a hand through her hair. It's been over for a long time, Michael. We barely talk anymore. We're like roommates, not spouses. I haven't been happy for years. And you never thought to mention this to me, to suggest counseling, to try to fix things. You just decided on your own that our marriage was over, found someone new, and planned to replace me in our son's life. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, though her actions spoke otherwise. I thought it would be easier this way to just make a clean break. I laughed bitterly. Easier for you maybe, not for Jamie, and certainly not for me. Sarah's face hardened. Robert can provide things for Jamie that you can't. He's successful, stable, his kids are well adjusted, and he owns a beautiful home in the best school district. Jamie would have opportunities with us that you could never give him. Her words cut deep, targeting my biggest insecurities. I had always worked hard to provide for my family, but Sarah had come from money and had expectations I could never quite meet on a teacher's salary. Robert, with his expensive watch and talk of a big house, was clearly more in line with the lifestyle she wanted. So that's what this is about. Money. You're trading our family for a bigger house and a better zip code? I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. It's not just about money, she insisted. Robert understands me. He makes me feel special, appreciated. When was the last time you even noticed me, Michael? When was the last time we went on a date or had a conversation that wasn't about bills or Jamie's school? The accusation stung because there was some truth to it. Between my job as a high school history teacher, coaching the basketball team, and Sarah's work as a real estate agent, we had fallen into a routine that left little time for romance. But I had always thought we were partners, working together toward common goals, building a life and raising our son. I didn't know you were so unhappy, I admitted. You never said anything. I shouldn't have had to, she replied. You should have seen it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 8 years together and all that had gone unsaid hanging between us. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking and kids playing, normal sounds from a normal Saturday that felt surreal against the backdrop of my collapsing marriage. "I want a divorce, Michael," Sarah finally said. "I've already found an apartment for you. It's close enough that Jamie can stay in the same school, and it has 2 bedrooms so he can stay with you sometimes." I stared at her, incredulous. "You've already found me an apartment, so not only have you decided our marriage is over, you've already planned my exit. What about this house? What about Jamie?" "The house is in my name," she reminded me, referring to the fact that her parents had helped with the down payment and had insisted on putting the property in their daughter's name only. It was a point of contention early in our marriage that I had eventually let go of. Now I realized what a mistake that had been. "And Jamie will adjust," she continued. "Children are resilient. He'll come to love Robert and his kids once he gets used to the idea." "Did you not hear what he said downstairs?" I asked. "He's devastated, and he just told you he wants to be with me." Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "He was upset and caught off guard. Once he calms down, he'll understand. I'm his mother. Of course he'll want to stay with me." Her confidence was infuriating, as was her dismissal of Jamie's feelings. For all her talk about being unhappy in our marriage, she seemed remarkably unconcerned about our son's happiness. "We need to think about what's best for Jamie," I insisted. "And what's best is not tearing apart his world overnight to make room for your new boyfriend." "Robert isn't just some boyfriend," she said defensively. "We're serious. He's going to propose once my divorce is finalized." I felt as if I'd been punched in the gut again. "How long has this been going on, Sarah? And don't lie to me, I deserve at least that much honesty." She hesitated, and I could see her calculating how much to reveal. 6 months, she finally admitted. "But we've known each other for over a year. He was a client buying a luxury property. We stayed in touch." 6 months. While I was teaching classes, grading papers, coaching basketball, and coming home to what I thought was a tired but stable marriage, my wife had been building a new life with another man. Planning her escape, looking at apartments for me, all behind my back. "I trusted you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought we were a team." "We were," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Once. But people change, Michael. I've changed. I want different things now." Before I could respond, we heard a small noise from the stairway. Jamie was sitting on the steps, listening to our conversation. How much he had heard, I couldn't be sure, but the tears streaming down his face told me it was enough. "Jamie," Sarah said, her tone immediately shifting to motherly concern, "you should be in your room, honey." Jamie ignored her, looking directly at me. "Are you going to leave us, Daddy?" I moved to the stairs and sat beside him, putting my arm around his small shoulders. "It looks like Mommy and I might not live together anymore," I said gently, trying to be honest without adding to his pain. "But I will never, ever leave you. I'll always be your dad, no matter what." "Can I come with you?" he asked, his eyes pleading. "I don't want to stay with that man. I don't like him." Before I could respond, Sarah interjected, "Jamie, you don't even know Robert yet. He's very nice and his kids could be your friends. You'll have so much fun at his big house. He has a pool." Jamie's response was immediate and heartbreaking. "I don't care about a pool, I care about Daddy." Sarah looked stricken, and for the first time I saw doubt in her eyes. She had clearly convinced herself that Jamie would quickly adapt to the new arrangement, perhaps even prefer the more luxurious lifestyle Robert could provide. She hadn't counted on our son's loyalty or the depth of his attachment to me. "We'll figure something out," I promised Jamie, though I had no idea what that would be. With the house in Sarah's name and her higher income as a successful real estate agent, I was at a significant disadvantage if we fought for custody. "I'm tired," Jamie said suddenly, leaning against me. The emotional toll of the day had exhausted him, and it wasn't even dinner time yet. "Why don't you lie down for a bit?" I suggested. "I'll come check on you soon." After Jamie went back to his room, Sarah and I looked at each other across the living room. The distance between us felt insurmountable. "This isn't going how I planned," she admitted, a hint of frustration in her voice. "Did you really think it would?" I asked. "That you could just introduce a replacement family and Jamie would happily go along with it?" "He's 7, she said. "He doesn't understand adult relationships. I thought he'd be excited about the new house, the pool, having other kids around." "Our son isn't that shallow, Sarah. He cares about relationships, not things. And he's old enough to understand abandonment and betrayal even if he doesn't know those words yet." Sarah crossed her arms defensively. "I'm not abandoning him, I'm his mother. I'll always be there for him." "But you're abandoning our family," I pointed out. "The only home he's ever known, the life we built together, and you're trying to replace me with a man he's never met until today." "I'm not replacing you," she insisted. You'll still be his father, you'll have visitation. The word visitation cut through me like a knife. The thought of seeing my son on a schedule of being reduced to a weekend parent was unbearable. I want joint custody, I said firmly. Equal time, Jamie needs both of us. Sarah hesitated. We can discuss that with the lawyers, but Jamie's home should be with me, with us. Robert's house has more space, better schools. Stop talking about Robert's house, I said, my patience finally snapping. Our son just told you he wants to be with me. Not with Robert, not with his fancy house and pool, with me. Doesn't that tell you something? It tells me he's confused and upset, she replied. Once things calm down, he'll adjust. I shook my head, realizing how little she understood our son, or perhaps she simply didn't want to acknowledge the truth because it didn't fit with her plans. I'm going to check on Jamie, I said, too emotionally drained to continue the conversation. We can talk more later about practical arrangements, but Sarah, I want you to know something. I won't make this easy for you, not after how you've handled it. I'll fight for my son. As I climbed the stairs to Jamie's room, I felt a strange mix of heartbreak and determination. My marriage might be over, but my role as a father was more important than ever. Jamie needed me, and I wouldn't let him down. When I opened the door to his room, Jamie was curled up on his bed, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. He wasn't asleep, just staring at the wall with that serious expression that made him look so much older than his 7 years. Hey, buddy, I said softly, sitting on the edge of his bed. How are you doing? Is Mommy really going to make us live with that man? He asked, getting straight to the point as kids often do. I sighed, wishing I could shield him from all of this, but knowing honesty was important. Mommy and Robert want to be together, and yes, Mommy wants you to live with them, but I want you to live with me too. We're going to have to figure out how to make that work. I don't understand why Mommy doesn't want to be with you anymore, he said, his small face scrunched in confusion. Did you do something bad? No, buddy, I assured him, though part of me wondered what I could have done differently. Sometimes grown-ups just change, they want different things. It doesn't mean anyone did something wrong. She says Robert is rich and has a big house and a pool, Jamie said, his tone suggesting he found these details irrelevant. But I like our house. I like my room and my school and my friends. I know, I said, stroking his hair. And you might still be able to go to the same school. We'll try to keep as many things the same as possible. Jamie sat up suddenly, his eyes bright with an idea. Maybe if I tell Mommy I really don't want to live with Robert, she'll change her mind. Maybe we can all still be together. The hope in his voice broke my heart. As much as I wanted to nurture that hope, to believe there was a chance Sarah would reconsider, I knew it would be cruel to let Jamie think he could fix this. I don't think Mommy will change her mind about Robert, I said gently. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you, and it definitely doesn't mean I'll stop loving you or being your dad. That will never change. Jamie's face fell, but he nodded slowly, processing this difficult truth with a maturity that made my chest ache. Can I have a sleepover at Grandma and Grandpa's tonight? He asked suddenly. I don't want to be here with Mommy, I'm mad at her. My parents lived about 20 minutes away and adored their only grandchild. They'd be more than happy to have Jamie for the night, and frankly, it might be good for him to be away from the tension in our house. Let me call Grandma and check, I said, already pulling out my phone, but I think that's a good idea. It'll give Mommy and me some time to talk more about everything. After arranging the sleepover and helping Jamie pack an overnight bag, I drove him to my parents' house. I gave them a brief, sanitized version of what was happening, promising to fill them in properly later. My mother's face showed shock and disappointment, while my father's expression hardened in a way I rarely saw. They had always liked Sarah, always welcomed her into the family, even when her own parents had been somewhat cool toward me. Take all the time you need, my mother said, hugging me tightly. Jamie is always welcome here, and so are you. Thanks, Mom, I said, grateful for their unwavering support. I'll pick him up tomorrow afternoon. On the drive back home, I tried to organize my thoughts and plan my next steps. I needed to talk to a lawyer, figure out my rights regarding Jamie and the house. I needed to look at my finances and see what kind of place I could afford if Sarah really did force me out. Most of all, I needed to ensure that whatever happened, Jamie's well-being remained the priority. When I arrived home, Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in front of her and her laptop open. She looked up when I entered, her expression guarded. Where's Jamie? She asked. At my parents' house, I replied, hanging my keys on the hook by the door, a simple domestic gesture that suddenly felt poignant given the circumstances. He asked to have a sleepover there. I thought it would be good for him to have some space from all of this. Sarah frowned. You should have asked me first, I'm his mother. And I'm his father, I replied evenly. He asked me and I made a judgment call. He needed some time away and my parents were happy to have him. She seemed about to argue further but then sighed, taking a sip of her wine instead. Fine, but in the future we need to make these decisions together. Like the decision to end our marriage or to introduce Jamie to your boyfriend. I couldn't help but point out the hypocrisy. Sarah had the grace to look slightly abashed. That's different. No, it's not, I said, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. You made unilateral decisions that affect all of us without discussion or warning. You don't get to complain when I take Jamie to his grandparents' house for one night. She closed her laptop, focusing her full attention on me. I know you're angry, Michael. You have a right to be, but this isn't productive. We need to figure out how to move forward. Fine, I agreed, pushing aside my hurt and anger for now. Let's talk practically. You mentioned an apartment you found for me. Where is it? About 10 minutes from here, she said, seemingly relieved to shift to logistics. It's in the Oak Ridge complex, a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor. The lease is month to month, so you wouldn't be locked in if you found something better. I nodded, trying to picture the complex. It wasn't the worst place, but it was definitely a step down from our house. And when exactly were you planning for me to move? The apartment is available at the beginning of next month, she said. That gives you about 2 weeks to pack and get settled before Jamie starts the new school semester. Everything was so neatly planned, so thoroughly thought out. While I had been going about my life, teaching my students and raising our son, Sarah had been orchestrating my exit, right down to the timing with the school calendar. And what about custody? I asked, bracing myself for her answer. I was thinking you could have him every other weekend and maybe one evening during the week for dinner, she said, as if this were a generous offer. Of course, during the summer when school is out, we could be more flexible. Every other weekend, 4 days a month with my son after being present for every day of his life for 7 years. It was unthinkable. That's not going to work for me, I said firmly. I want joint physical custody, equal time, 1 week with me, 1 week with you. Sarah's expression hardened. That's too disruptive for Jamie. Children need stability, a primary home. Children need both their parents, I countered. And Jamie explicitly said he wants to be with me. He's old enough that a judge would take his preference into consideration. At the mention of a judge, Sarah's posture changed subtly. Are you threatening to take me to court? I'm saying I won't agree to being a part-time father, I replied. Jamie deserves better than that, and so do I. If we can't come to a reasonable agreement, then yes, a judge will have to decide. Sarah took another sip of her wine, her mind clearly working through the implications. You can't afford a custody battle, she finally said. My father will pay for the best family lawyer in the state. You'll drain your savings and still lose. Her threat landed like a physical blow. She was right that her family had far more resources than I did. Her father, a successful business owner, could easily fund a protracted legal battle that would leave me financially ruined. So that's how it's going to be, I asked quietly. You're going to use your family's money to keep me from my son. Something flickered in Sarah's eyes, guilt perhaps, or a moment of recognition at what she was becoming, but it passed quickly. I'm being practical, she said. Fighting will only hurt Jamie. If you really care about his well-being, you'll accept a reasonable visitation schedule and focus on making the transition as smooth as possible for him. And Robert, I asked, what's his role in all this? Is he going to be playing daddy while I'm limited to seeing my son 4 days a month? Sarah sighed. Robert isn't trying to replace you, but yes, he will be living with us and he'll naturally be involved in Jamie's daily life. His kids are older, they can be like big siblings to Jamie. It could be really good for him. I thought about Jamie's reaction to meeting Robert and his children. The tears, the defiance, the plea to come with me instead. Jamie doesn't want new siblings or a stepfather he's never met. He wants his family to stay together. He'll adjust, Sarah said again, that phrase she kept repeating as if saying it enough would make it true. Children are adaptable. I stood up, unable to continue the conversation without saying things I might regret. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow I'm going to call a lawyer and find out exactly what my rights are, and then we can continue this discussion. Sarah looked surprised. You're not leaving? Not until I have to, I said. This is my home too, at least for now, and I'm not going to let you dictate the terms of my relationship with my son without a fight. As I turned to leave the kitchen, Sarah called after me, Michael, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. For Jamie's sake. I paused in the doorway. That's exactly why I'm fighting, Sarah. For Jamie's sake. Not for a bigger house or a pool or a more convenient life. For my son, who deserves to have his father fully present in his life. With that, I went upstairs to the guest room, closing the door behind me. As I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, the full weight of the day crashed down on me. My marriage was over. My wife had been planning to replace me with another man for months. My son was caught in the middle, his world turned upside down by adult decisions he couldn't possibly understand. I allowed myself a moment to break down, to feel the raw pain of betrayal and loss. But only a moment. Then I wiped my eyes, pulled out my phone, and started researching family law attorneys. Sarah might have money and a head start, but I had something more important, the love of my son and the determination to do right by him, no matter what it took. The next morning, I woke early before Sarah and went for a run to clear my head. When I returned, she was in the kitchen making coffee, already dressed for the day in her typical polished realtor outfit. "I'm going to pick up Jamie at noon," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "My parents are taking him to church this morning," Sarah nodded. "Fine, Robert is coming over later. He wants to talk to both of us to see if we can smooth things over after yesterday's awkwardness." I laughed incredulously. "Awkwardness? Is that what you call blindsiding your husband and traumatizing your child?" "That's not fair," she said defensively. "I was trying to facilitate an introduction that needs to happen eventually. Robert is going to be part of Jamie's life whether you like it or not." "Maybe so," I conceded, "but it should have happened after you and I had already discussed our separation, after we had prepared Jamie for the changes, and certainly not with Robert's children present as if it were a done deal." Sarah sighed. "Fine, it wasn't handled perfectly. That's why Robert wants to talk, to start fresh." I shook my head. "I have nothing to say to Robert. My discussions about our marriage and our son will be with you, not with the man you've been seeing behind my back." "He's going to be Jamie's stepfather," Sarah insisted. "You'll have to deal with him eventually." "Eventually," I agreed. "But not today. Today I'm picking up my son, spending time with him, and then calling a lawyer tomorrow morning. When I'm ready to have a civilized conversation about co-parenting with you and Robert, I'll let you know." Sarah's expression hardened. "You're being childish." "No," I said calmly. "I'm setting boundaries, something I should have done a long time ago." I left the kitchen before she could respond, heading upstairs to shower and change. By the time I came back down, Sarah was gone, presumably to meet Robert somewhere else since I had refused to talk to him at our house. I spent the morning researching lawyers, making notes of questions to ask, and trying to gather financial documents that might be relevant to a divorce proceeding. It was surreal to be sitting at my desk in our home office, planning the dissolution of my marriage while surrounded by family photos and mementos from happier times. At noon, I drove to my parents' house to pick up Jamie. He seemed in better spirits after a night away, though there was still a wariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before yesterday. "Did you have fun with Grandma and Grandpa?" I asked as we drove home. "Yeah," he said, looking out the window. "Grandma made pancakes for breakfast and Grandpa let me help wash his car. They said I can come stay whenever I want." "That's great, buddy," I said, grateful for my parents' support. "You can definitely visit them often." After a moment of silence, Jamie asked the question that was clearly weighing on his mind. "Is Mommy's new boyfriend going to be at our house when we get back?" I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "I don't think so. Mommy went out for a while." Jamie nodded, visibly relieved. "Good. I told Grandma I don't like him. She said I don't have to like him right away, but I should be polite." "Grandma's right," I said, though it took effort to be the bigger person. "Even when we don't like someone, we should still be respectful." "But do I have to live with him?" Jamie pressed. "Mommy said I'm going to have a new room in his house." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Nothing has been decided yet, Jamie. Mommy and I still need to figure out a lot of things, but I promise you'll always have a home with me no matter what." When we arrived home, the house was still empty. I made Jamie lunch, and we spent the afternoon playing board games, a normal father-son activity that felt precious now that I realized how tenuous my daily presence in his life had become. Sarah returned late in the afternoon, alone thankfully. She greeted Jamie with forced cheerfulness, but he responded coolly, still upset with her. The tension in the house was palpable, and Jamie stayed close to my side for the rest of the evening. That night after Jamie was asleep, Sarah approached me in the guest room. "I spoke with Robert," she said, standing in the doorway. "He understands the situation is delicate. We've agreed to slow things down a bit to give Jamie more time to adjust before making any major changes." I looked up from my laptop where I had been comparing lawyers. "Slow things down. That's a start, but it doesn't change the fundamental issue. You've been planning to replace me in our son's life without even giving me the courtesy of a conversation first." Sarah leaned against the doorframe, looking tired. I made mistakes in how I handled this, I admit that, but the end result will be the same. Our marriage is over, Michael. I want a divorce. I understand that, I said, closing my laptop. But how we handle that divorce, especially regarding Jamie, is still very much up for discussion. What do you want? She asked directly. Joint physical custody, equal time with my son, and I want any introduction to Robert to happen slowly on Jamie's terms, not yours or Robert's. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. I can agree to introduce Robert more gradually, she finally said. But I still think Jamie's primary residence should be with me, with us. That's not acceptable, I replied firmly. I'm his father. I've been an active, involved parent from day one. I won't accept being reduced to a weekend dad. Let me think about it, she said, which was more of a concession than I'd expected. We'll talk more tomorrow. The next day, I called a lawyer recommended by a colleague who had gone through a divorce the previous year. The initial consultation was sobering but informative. Because of Sarah's higher income and her family's resources, I would be at a disadvantage in a court battle. However, the lawyer pointed out that my consistent involvement in Jamie's life, combined with his expressed preference to be with me, could strengthen my position. Document everything, the lawyer advised. Every conversation, every time Sarah tries to limit your access to Jamie, every indication of his preference to be with you. And start looking for a place to live that would be suitable for a child. Judges like stability. Over the next 2 weeks, things settled into an uneasy truce at home. Sarah and I barely spoke beyond necessary communications about Jamie or household matters. I slept in the guest room and started packing some of my personal belongings, accepting that I would indeed need to move out eventually. Robert didn't come to the house again, though I knew Sarah was still seeing him elsewhere. Jamie remained wary around his mother, which clearly troubled Sarah. She made efforts to win back his affection with gifts and promises of fun activities, but he maintained a cool distance that was unusual for my normally affectionate son. One evening, as I was helping Jamie with his homework, Sarah came into the dining room and sat across from us. I've been thinking, she said, addressing both of us, about our living arrangements going forward. Jamie immediately tensed beside me, his pencil going still on his math worksheet. I know Jamie has concerns about the changes, Sarah continued, choosing her words carefully, and I want to make this transition as comfortable as possible for everyone. She looked directly at me. I'm willing to consider a more equal custody arrangement, perhaps alternating weeks as you suggested. I was surprised by this concession, given her earlier stance. What changed your mind? Sarah glanced at Jamie, who was watching her with wary eyes. I've realized that forcing Jamie into a situation he's uncomfortable with isn't in anyone's best interest. And she hesitated. Robert and I have decided to take things more slowly. He'll keep his house and I'll keep this one for now. We can revisit living arrangements after everything has settled. Relief washed over me. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Sarah was finally acknowledging Jamie's feelings and needs, rather than just her own desires. What do you think, buddy? I asked Jamie, who had been listening intently. So I'd stay with you for a whole week, then with Mom for a whole week, he clarified. Sarah nodded. That's right, you'd have 2 homes, but they'd both be familiar places with your own rooms and your own things. Jamie considered this, his small face serious. And I don't have to live with Robert. Sarah flinched slightly at the direct question. Not right now, no, you'll still meet him occasionally, but only for short visits until you're more comfortable. Jamie looked up at me, seeking reassurance. I gave him an encouraging nod, letting him know it was okay to express his true feelings. I guess that would be okay, he finally said, though without much enthusiasm. As long as I still get to see Daddy a lot. You will, Sarah assured him. Daddy will always be your father, and he'll always be an important part of your life. After Jamie went to bed, Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table to discuss the practical details of our separation. There was still hurt and anger between us, but for the first time since she had introduced Robert into our lives, we were having a real conversation about co-parenting rather than a power struggle. I'm sorry, she said unexpectedly, after we had worked out initial schedules for Jamie's time with each of us. I handled this all wrong. I was so caught up in my own feelings in this new relationship with Robert that I didn't think enough about how it would affect Jamie. Or you. Why didn't you just talk to me? I asked, the question that had been haunting me for weeks. If you were that unhappy, why not say something? Why not try to fix things or at least end them honestly? Sarah sighed, looking down at her hands. I was afraid of the conflict, afraid of hurting you, afraid of disrupting Jamie's life. It seemed easier to have everything arranged before telling you. I convinced myself it would be a cleaner break that way. It wasn't, I said simply. No, she agreed. It wasn't, and I underestimated Jamie's attachment to you. I thought children naturally stayed with their mothers, that he would adjust quickly. I was wrong. Her admission didn't erase the pain of her betrayal, but it did help me understand the thinking behind her actions. Sarah had always been someone who avoided conflict, who preferred to present solutions rather than discuss problems. It was an approach that worked well in her real estate career, but had proven disastrous for our marriage. Where do we go from here? I asked. Forward, she said. Separately, but with Jamie's best interests at heart. I won't try to limit your time with him or replace you with Robert. That was unfair and unrealistic. 3 months later, I was settled into a small house I had rented just a few blocks from Jamie's school. It wasn't fancy, but it had a yard where Jamie could play and a comfortable bedroom that he had helped decorate himself. On the weeks he stayed with me, we fell into pleasant routines of homework, basketball practice, and weekend movie nights. Sarah had kept her word about slowing things down with Robert. Jamie had met him a few more times, always in neutral settings like parks or restaurants, and always for brief periods. To his credit, Robert had been patient and hadn't tried to force a relationship, taking his cues from Jamie's comfort level. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, with fewer conflicts than I had initially feared. Sarah's acknowledgement that Jamie needed both of us equally had made the process less adversarial than it might have been. One evening, during my week with Jamie, I was making dinner when my phone rang with Sarah's number. "Michael," she said when I answered, her voice sounding strained. "Can I come over? I need to talk to you about something important." "Is everything okay?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Is it about Jamie?" "Yes and no," she replied cryptically. "It's complicated. Can I just come over?" An hour later, Sarah was sitting at my kitchen table while Jamie played video games in the living room, oblivious to his mother's unexpected visit. "Robert proposed last night," she said without preamble. "He wants us to set a date for the wedding this summer." I felt a twinge of pain despite knowing this had been coming. "I see, and you're here because I said I needed to talk to Jamie first to make sure he's okay with it," she said. "And I wanted to talk to you about how to approach the conversation. You understand him better than I do right now." Her admission surprised me. Since our separation, Sarah had been making efforts to rebuild her relationship with Jamie, but progress had been slow. He was polite but guarded with her, still hurt by her actions and the disruption to our family. "I appreciate you asking," I said sincerely. "But I'm not sure Jamie is ready for this step. He's still adjusting to our separation." Sarah nodded, looking troubled. "I know, that's what worries me, but Robert is getting impatient. He says we've already delayed our plans enough because of Jamie's resistance." Something about her words bothered me. Jamie's resistance? Is that how he phrases it? Sarah hesitated. "He doesn't understand why Jamie hasn't warmed up to him yet. He thinks I'm being too cautious, letting a 7-year-old dictate our relationship timeline." "That doesn't sound like someone who's ready to be a stepfather," I pointed out. "Jamie isn't being difficult. He's processing a major life change. He needs time and understanding, not pressure." "I know," Sarah said, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "I've tried to explain that to Robert, but he thinks I'm coddling Jamie. He says children need firm boundaries, not endless negotiation." I felt a surge of protectiveness for my son. Jamie doesn't need firm boundaries from a man he barely knows. He needs his feelings respected. Sarah looked torn, and I could see the conflict playing out on her face. She wanted to move forward with Robert, but she was finally beginning to understand the potential cost to her relationship with Jamie. "Maybe I should wait," she said finally. "Give Jamie more time before introducing the idea of a wedding." "I think that would be wise," I agreed, relieved by her decision. Jamie's only just starting to adjust to our new normal. Adding another major change right now could set back all the progress we've made. Sarah nodded, looking out toward the living room where Jamie was still absorbed in his game. "When did you become the better parent?" she asked softly with a sad smile. "I'm not," I said honestly. "I just have a different relationship with him, and right now I haven't hurt him the way you did, so he's more open with me." "That will change with time if you keep putting his needs first." Sarah stayed for dinner, and I watched as she made genuine efforts to connect with Jamie, asking about his game and his day at school. He was cautious but responsive, and by the end of the evening, he even gave her a real hug goodbye instead of the perfunctory ones he had been offering since our separation. After she left, Jamie sat beside me on the couch, leaning against my side in the comfortable way he often did during our quiet moments together. "Dad," he said after a while, "I'm glad I get to live with you half the time." "Me too, buddy," I replied, putting my arm around his shoulders. "And I'm glad Mom isn't making me live with Robert," he continued. "She said I don't have to if I don't want to." "Your mom loves you very much," I told him, choosing my words carefully. "She's trying to do what's best for you even if she doesn't always get it right." Jamie nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think she'll marry Robert?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Would that bother you if she did?" Jamie was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Maybe not if I still get to live with you half the time." "And if he's nicer to me than he was before?" "Robert wasn't nice to you?" I asked, concerned. Jamie shrugged. "He wasn't mean, he just talked to me like I was a baby, and he told Mom that I was spoiled when he thought I couldn't hear. That's why I said I wanted to stay with you. I was afraid if I lived with them, he would make Mom treat me differently." His words hit me like a revelation. Jamie's strong reaction to Robert hadn't just been about loyalty to me or resistance to change. He had picked up on something in Robert's attitude that had genuinely worried him. "Thank you for telling me that," I said, giving him a gentle squeeze. "If anyone ever makes you uncomfortable or treats you in a way you don't like, you can always tell me. Always." "I know, Dad," he said with the simple confidence of a child who feels secure in his parents' love. "That's why I want to be with you." 6 months after Sarah's surprise introduction of Robert into our lives, things had settled into a new pattern. Jamie alternated weeks between my house and Sarah's, with transitions that became increasingly smooth as we all adjusted to the arrangement. The divorce was finalized, with joint physical custody officially recognized in the court documents. Sarah had postponed any wedding plans indefinitely, choosing instead to focus on rebuilding her relationship with Jamie. Robert remained in the picture, but had become more respectful of boundaries, perhaps finally understanding that forcing a relationship with Jamie would only backfire. As for me, I had found an unexpected peace in my new life. The pain of Sarah's betrayal had gradually subsided, replaced by a focus on my role as Jamie's father and on rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. I had even started dating occasionally, though I was careful to keep those relationships separate from Jamie for now. One afternoon, as Jamie and I were walking home from the park, he asked me a question that showed just how much he had processed over the past months. "Dad, are you still sad that Mom wanted to be with Robert instead of you?" I considered how to answer honestly while respecting both his maturity and his innocence. "I was sad at first," I admitted. "It's always hard when a relationship ends, especially one that was as important as my marriage to your mom, but I'm not sad anymore. I'm happy with my life, especially the time I get to spend with you." Jamie nodded, satisfied with my answer. "I told Mom I'm glad you're my dad," he said, "and I told her that her boyfriend isn't my dad even if they get married someday." "That's true," I agreed. "No one can ever replace me as your dad, just like no one could ever replace your mom. That's something that never changes, no matter what else happens in life." Jamie reached for my hand as we walked, a gesture he had recently started to outgrow but still offered occasionally in moments of connection. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, Jamie, always and forever." As we continued home, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. Sarah's attempt to replace me in Jamie's life had failed, not because of any victory on my part, but because of the simple, profound bond between father and son. Jamie's words that day when he first met Robert, "If Daddy goes, I go too," had been more than just a child's momentary rebellion. They had been a declaration of the enduring connection that no new boyfriend, no matter how impressive his house or lifestyle, could ever sever. In trying to construct a perfect new life with Robert, Sarah had overlooked the most important factor, our son's heart. And in the end, it was Jamie's unwavering love and loyalty that had not only preserved my place in his life, but had also taught Sarah a valuable lesson about what truly matters in building a family. The road ahead would still have its challenges as we navigated co-parenting and eventual new relationships. But I faced it with confidence, secure in the knowledge that the bond between Jamie and me was unbreakable. No introduction, no matter how poorly planned or selfishly motivated, could ever change that simple truth.